He whispered my name while dominating me, and I shivered, caught between fear and curiosity. Every glance, every word, pulled me deeper into a game I wasn't sure I could win. Don't miss a moment of this intense BL journey. Subscribe, like, and comment to follow every twist and secret. The first time he whispered my name, the world went silent. It wasn't loud enough for anyone else to hear, just a soft, deliberate sound, low enough to vibrate somewhere under my skin. The lecture hall was half dark, rain sliding down the tall glass windows of Harrington Law like it was trying to escape. The air smelled of wet coats, nerves, and too much ambition. The mock trial finals were today and everyone was waiting for blood. Professor Calder had a habit of breaking people in front of the class just to see who could still smile after. I'd studied for 3 nights straight. Coffee, panic, repeat. My notes were color-coded, my tie straight, my pulse too loud. I just needed to survive the day. Then he walked in. Reagar Vale. He didn't have to introduce himself. Everyone already knew him, the university's golden storm. Tall, sharp-featured, dressed in quiet arrogance. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie hanging loose as if he'd been born too powerful to follow dress codes. Reagar had that kind of beauty that didn't ask to be looked at, it commanded it. When Professor Calder announced we'd be partners for the final case, I forgot how to breathe. Reagar Vale, the undefeated captain of the debate team, the law department's untouchable prodigy. And me, Kel, the scholarship kid who survived on silence and good grades. I'd worked so hard to stay invisible. Now I was standing next to the one person everyone watched. He turned his head slowly, eyes finding me like he already knew I'd be there. "You're Kel, right?" I nodded somehow. "Good." Then he leaned in, his breath brushing the shell of my ear as he whispered, soft, controlled, unreasonably intimate. "Try to keep up." The world shifted. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone, low, dangerous, deliberate. Like he'd spoken directly to the part of me that didn't know how to defend itself. My pulse reacted before my brain could. And I hated that it did. When the mock trial started, Reagar transformed. His confidence filled the courtroom like smoke, thick, inescapable, suffocating in the most hypnotic way. Every sentence he spoke was sharp enough to draw blood. He didn't just argue, he orchestrated. The judge, the jury, even the opposing team, they were all dancing to a rhythm he created. I was supposed to deliver our secondary argument, but when I looked at him, my focus fractured. He stood too close, his cologne faint but intoxicating, amber and something darker. "Your Honor," I began, my voice unsteady, "the defendant's prior intent." Slower, Reagar murmured beside me. My words caught. He wasn't even looking at me. His gaze was fixed ahead, his mouth barely moving. "Breathe, Kel," he whispered. "Now." Again. The command wrapped around me like a leash I didn't remember agreeing to. I inhaled. Exhaled. My voice came out clearer this time, steadier. He smiled just barely. "Good boy." The phrase was quiet, almost affectionate, but it struck through me like lightning. I stumbled on the next line, heat crawling up my neck. When the session ended, I practically fled the podium. My heartbeat hadn't slowed by the time Reagar caught up to me in the hallway. "You're tense," he said, leaning against the wall with that infuriating calm. "You think too much." "I'm focused," I said, even though my hands still trembled. He raised an eyebrow. "No. You're scared." I flinched. He wasn't wrong and he knew it. "I just don't like being watched," I muttered. Reagar's smirk deepened. "Then make them want to watch you." I glared at him. "Easy for you to say. People already do." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That's the point, Kel. They look at me because I make them. You could too, if you stopped hiding." "I'm not hiding." He leaned in until his lips were inches from my ear. "Then prove it." His breath was warm against my skin. The words were a dare, a threat, a promise, and before I could form a reply, he walked away. The following week, he booked a private room for practice. The debate floor was empty, soundproofed, and bathed in late afternoon light. "You're late," he said when I arrived, even though I wasn't. "You said 4. I meant earlier than 4. His tone was casual, but there was that hint of dominance again, woven into every word. We started running through arguments, but it didn't feel like practice. It felt like exposure. Reagar corrected everything, my stance, my breathing, the rhythm of my words. "Don't stare at the table," he said. "Look at me." I did, and regretted it instantly. His gaze held mine, steady and unblinking. The air between us felt thick, charged. I tried to speak, but the words caught somewhere in my throat. "Good," he murmured, stepping closer. Now keep eye contact. Don't break it no matter what. He circled behind me, his voice brushing against the back of my neck. You let people control the room when you should be the one doing it? I'm trying, I whispered. Try harder. The phrase echoed the same way it had that first day, soft but commanding. The kind of softness that demanded obedience. He reached past me to adjust my hand on the desk, his fingers grazing mine. The touch was light but I felt it everywhere. I turned barely and found his face inches from mine. Reagar. He smiled, slow and deliberate. Say it again. My lips parted. I didn't even realize I'd obeyed until the sound came out. Reagar. Something in his expression flickered, briefly human, briefly raw, before it vanished. Good, he whispered, his voice so low it almost wasn't sound. You're learning. He stepped back then, leaving me trembling and furious at how easily he could unmake me with words alone. But as I watched him gather his notes, calm and composed, a single thought lodged itself in my chest like a thorn. I didn't want him to stop. That night as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I could still hear him. Not his arguments. Not his arrogance. Just his voice, soft, deliberate, whispering my name like it meant something. And God help me, the memory made me shiver. It was raining again. Of course it was. The city lights blurred in the downpour as I stood outside Reagar's apartment building, trying to decide if this was a good idea. His message had been short. No greeting, no explanation. Come to my place. 8 sharp. Don't be late. I'd read it 5 times before replying with a single word. Okay. The elevator ride felt longer than any debate round. I could hear my own heartbeat over the soft hum of machinery. When the doors opened, he was already there, barefoot, sleeves rolled, the kind of calm that made me nervous. You came, he said, as if there had ever been a choice. The apartment was a mix of steel and shadow, walls lined with books and windows that framed the rain. The faint sound of jazz drifted through the air. This is where you practice? I asked. He smiled slightly. It's where I think. Same thing, isn't it? He motioned toward a low table near the window. Case files were spread across it in precise stacks. I sat, but he remained standing, studying me the way he did in class, like I was a puzzle he'd already solved. Read this, he said, handing me a page. I started, but my voice cracked halfway through. The words felt heavy in my mouth, too aware of his silence. Stop, he said quietly. You're forcing it. Try again. I took a breath, but my throat felt tight. Look at me when you speak. I did, and that was the mistake. His gaze was steady, impossible to ignore. I tried again, but the rhythm faltered. Slower, he murmured. Something about the way he said it, low, unhurried, pulled the air right out of my lungs. I spoke slower. The words came out smoother, anchored. Reagar nodded. Better. You don't need volume, Kel. You need gravity. He stepped closer, slow enough for me to feel each inch of distance disappearing. The lamplight caught in his eyes, amber and unreadable. You hold your breath when you talk, he said. That's why your voice dies halfway through. He raised a hand, stopping just short of my shoulder. Here. This is where the tension lives. I could feel the warmth of his palm without it touching me. My pulse jumped. Breathe, he said. So I did. The air scraped through my throat like it had forgotten the way. Again, he whispered. I read the line once more. This time it sounded different, even to me. Steadier. Almost confident. There, he said, his tone softening. You found it. The room felt smaller, quieter. I could hear the rain tapping against the glass and the faint rhythm of jazz in the background. Why do you do that? I asked. Do what? Get inside people's heads. Reagar's smile was quick, almost sad. Because I can't get out of my own. The honesty startled me. For a moment, the walls of control around him cracked, just enough for me to see the man behind them. I set the paper down. You push people until they break. Then what? Then they learn, he said simply. And if they don't? He shrugged. Then I do. I didn't know what to say to that. The rain filled the silence. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quiet. You think I enjoy control, don't you? He shook his head. No. I use it. There's a difference. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets. The city reflected across the glass, fractured by water. I learned early that people only listen when they feel small, he said. It's a habit I never unlearned. There was something raw in his tone, something that didn't match the Reagar who commanded every room. I found myself standing before I realized it. You don't have to do that with me. He turned, studying me like I'd said something dangerous. Don't I? No, I said, voice steadier now. You don't need control to be heard. Not with me. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then Reagar's expression shifted, just slightly but enough to make my chest tighten. You always surprise me, he said. I'm not trying to. That's what makes it work. The tension softened then, not gone, just different. Less like a wire pulled tight, more like one slowly uncoiling. He reached for the folder again, flipping through pages. You should lead tomorrow's session. Me? You've earned it. He glanced up, a hint of amusement flickering across his face. Unless you're afraid. I smiled despite myself. You'd like that, wouldn't you? He didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth curved in quiet agreement. When I finally left, the rain had eased into mist. I could still feel his presence, the weight of his attention, the echo of his voice. Low, certain, impossible to ignore. Reagar Vale was supposed to be my mentor, my partner in a mock trial. So why did it feel like he'd become the trial itself? The city looked clean this morning, like someone had washed the streets in sunlight and forgotten to touch the corners. But inside me nothing was clean. My thoughts were tangled, replaying every sharp look, every quiet instruction, every moment in Reagar's apartment that had left my pulse uneven. I told myself it was just practice. Just debate. Just learning. Yet the memory of him lingering close, calm, commanding, it refused to be rationalized. When I entered the seminar room, Reagar was already there, alone for once. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't organizing papers with deliberate precision. He was leaning against the windowsill, staring out at the pale morning light. And for the first time, I noticed the tension in his shoulders. The way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He didn't notice me at first. I leaned against the doorframe, pretending to adjust my bag while studying him. Then he turned, and something in his eyes flickered, an almost imperceptible shadow of exhaustion. Kel, he said quietly. You're early. I couldn't sleep, he admitted, voice low. Not teasing. Not commanding. Just honest. I blinked. That one simple sentence sent a ripple through me. The Reagar I knew, the one everyone saw in class, in debates, in presentations, never admitted fatigue, never admitted anything. And now here he was, revealing it to me, standing almost defenseless in the quiet light. I stepped closer. You should have rested, I said, though my words sounded like an accusation even to me. I couldn't, he said, looking away, brushing his hand over his face as if the gesture could erase the vulnerability he'd just shown. There's too much I need to prepare. It was easy to want to tell him it didn't matter. That I could handle things. That he didn't need to be the unshakable Reagar everyone expected him to be. But the words lodged in my throat. I wasn't supposed to feel protective of him. I was supposed to be the one who learned, who adapted, who obeyed. And yet I did. We started our morning practice. I was nervous, aware that every glance from him, every subtle movement, could undo my composure. But there was something different in the way he coached me today. The usual sharpness of his tone softened. He didn't lean in with his usual quiet dominance. Instead, he allowed distance, gave me space to speak, to stumble, to find my own rhythm. I noticed it first in his eyes. Where there was usually calculation, there was now hesitation, concern, and maybe a trace of fear, not of me, not exactly, but of what it would mean if I faltered. Stop worrying about perfection, he said. You're letting it strangle you. I hesitated, my heart jumping. I'm trying. You don't have to try so hard with me, he said softly. His voice caught somewhere between patience and something else, something raw. I could feel it before I understood it. He was letting me in. The session continued in that rhythm, my voice rising and falling, his corrections gentle but precise, his presence steady yet human in a way that made my chest tighten. For the first time, I realized that Reagar's control wasn't just about keeping me in line. He needed it himself the way some people need air to breathe. And now I was seeing him gasp for it. Later, during a break, I caught him staring out the window again, jaw tight, hands clenching and unclenching. Reagar, I said quietly. You don't have to carry everything yourself. He didn't answer immediately. Then finally his shoulders slumped just slightly and he let out a breath. You don't understand, he whispered. Nobody else can. The words were a crack in his armor. And I felt something inside me crack too. I'd always assumed the distance between us was fixed, determined by hierarchy and skill. But now, for the first time, it wasn't just his command that mattered, it was his hesitation, his vulnerability, the quiet moments he never allowed anyone to see. I'm not anyone else, I said softly, moving a little closer. I can see you. He looked at me, then really looked as if he hadn't expected it. His eyes, those sharp amber eyes that always felt like they could read me, wavered. For a moment the meticulous confidence vanished, leaving only a man who was tired, human, unsure. "You think you can handle this?" he asked, almost accusingly, almost pleading. "I can," I said. But the truth was more complicated. I could handle his instructions, his criticisms, his challenges, but could I handle seeing him fall apart? Seeing him unguarded? Seeing the Reagar that no one else ever saw? He said nothing, but he didn't move away. And that silence told me something I hadn't known before. He needed me to stay. By the end of the session, my hands shook, not from fear, not from nerves, but from the intensity of the unspoken things between us. I realized I wasn't just learning from him. I was learning him. His fears, his need for control, his rare glimpses of humanity. And in doing so, I felt my own defenses start to crumble. When I finally left, I stepped into the soft rain, shivering, not from the cold but from the weight of it all. Reagar Vale had built walls around himself so high, so precise, that no one had ever breached them. And yet, today I had seen the cracks. For the first time, I understood something fundamental about him. The stronger his control, the more fragile the man beneath it. And maybe, so was I. The rain had stopped by the time I arrived at Reagar's apartment again, leaving the streets gleaming and empty. I wasn't sure if it was the weather or me, but everything felt charged, fragile, like it could shatter with the smallest touch. Reagar was waiting. Not standing tall, not pacing, not commanding, just standing in the soft morning light filtering through the windows. He looked different. Less like the untouchable figure I'd known, more like a man who had been holding himself together for too long. "Kel," he said, voice low. Not a greeting. A statement. I swallowed. "You look tired." He smirked faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And you look expectant." I wasn't lying. Every session, every glance, every quiet word between us had led to this tension. The space between us wasn't just physical anymore. It carried weight. Weight I could feel pressing at my chest. "Reagar," I said, stepping closer. "You don't have to hold everything alone." "I can." "Stop." He raised a hand, but it wasn't a command. It was hesitation. For the first time, I felt him waver, unsure if he could let me in completely. "Go. I've never let anyone see this side of me. I don't even know if I can." And yet he was saying it to me. I reached out, carefully, almost tentatively, and touched his arm. A small gesture, but enough to make him flinch, enough to make my pulse spike. "Then let me," I whispered. "Let me see." His eyes met mine. They were amber, sharp, and for a moment, there was nothing behind them but raw, fragile honesty. He exhaled, a breath I could feel across the room. And then, almost imperceptibly, he leaned closer. I didn't move away. I couldn't. "Kel," he murmured, voice soft, almost shaking. "You don't understand. I can't stop wanting this. Wanting you." I could feel every word sink into me like a quiet storm. Not just desire. Not just need. Vulnerability. Fear. And something like trust. "I don't need to understand everything," I said, my own voice barely audible. "I just need to be here. With you." He froze for a heartbeat, then stepped even closer. The distance between us dissolved, leaving only the weight of what we hadn't said, what we hadn't admitted. "Kel?" His voice was so low I could barely hear it. "If I let you in, if I stop controlling." "You're safe with me," I interrupted gently. "You can let go." And for the first time he did. He exhaled fully, shoulders slumping as though he'd been holding the world on them, and finally set it down. That single moment, that single exhale, broke something open between us. The air felt different afterward. Not charged, not tense, not empty. It was full of possibility. Full of trust. He stepped back slightly, just enough to look at me properly. "I've never," his voice caught. "I've never let someone see the real me. Not like this." "I see you now," I said softly. "All of you." The corner of his mouth lifted faintly, genuinely. Not smug, not arrogant, just a real human smile. And in that smile, I realized how much of myself I had been holding back too. "I think I could get used to this," he admitted, almost shyly. "Me too," I whispered, and meant it. For the first time, Reagar didn't need to dominate. I didn't need to resist. The tension between us wasn't about control anymore. It was about connection, about understanding, about knowing that neither of us had to be alone in the storm we carried. He leaned closer again, just enough for our foreheads to almost touch. "Kel?" he whispered, the sound low, certain, and gentle. And I shivered. But not from fear this time. I shivered because I knew we had crossed the line from distance to trust, from tension to something deeper, from command to belonging. He whispered my name again, slower, deliberate, almost reverent. Cal. And I realized I didn't want it to stop, because in that whisper he had let go. And in that whisper I felt free. Finally, I understood. Control wasn't strength. Vulnerability was. And letting someone see the cracks in your armor wasn't weakness. It was trust. I smiled. I'm here, I whispered back. And that was all that mattered.